Good morning, Ronan Kelly. This
Morning,
is
Simon.
Qatar episode 8. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Good stuff. Not too bad. Thanks very much. How's the family? Are they still in Qatar or have they gone back to Ireland?
Yeah, all good. They're still here at the moment. They're
Yeah.
hoping to get out of here in the next couple of weeks, but I think at the moment everybody's just a bit unsure as to how the summer's going to go, and I think there's not going to be an issue of getting out of Qatar. I think it's going to be the question of how do you get back into Qatar is the issue, because with my wife teaching, obviously she needs to be back about 2 or 3 weeks before the kids go back to school, you see, because of preparation and stuff. So
Yeah, and I
hoping
would
to get.
hope I would hope the government have got a little bit of common sense about certainly RP holders. I've seen the phased approach, which most other countries are doing as well.
Yeah.
There's a phased approach of 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think phase 3 indicated that RP holders can get back in, and that's due to be. And this is not confirmed, but I've seen some dates flying around that it's due to be the end of July. So we shall see. I think it's. I think they're doing the right thing. I think they're taking their time. But I think everyone's looking for a little bit of clarity. So we'll see how that pans out. My family's in exactly the same boat.
Yeah.
Exactly the same boat. Very quick introduction for the listeners. Welcome to This is Qatar episode 8. We've got Ronan Kelly. Ronan and I, we've known each other for, I think it must be about 7 years now, is it? 6 or 7 years?
Over, yeah, almost since the day I arrived in Qatar. I think I arrived on a Sunday, and I probably attended the first football training session on the following Friday morning. So I'm assuming that was the first time that we met.
I remember when we met because you came in and basically declared that you were the better footballer out of you and your brother, which was met by some hilarity. But then to be fair, no offense to your brother, but you then did actually go on and prove that. So that was good fun. That was good fun.
I'll make sure he sees this.
I'll give my regards to him anyway. I'll send him a message. So yeah, that's where we originally met. But then throughout our past and our careers, we've obviously caught up and discussed many elements with regards to the construction industry and obviously the claims industry, which you are very much a part of. And your journey has taken you in lots of different directions over the past 6 or 7 years, which we'll touch on. But first and foremost, how has the current situation, we'll get the negativity out of the way, how has the current situation affected your family life? How are the family and the children coping with it?
We haven't found it too bad because, as I say, just before we started here, we mentioned that I think your kids are slightly younger than mine. My youngest is 11, my son's 13, and my daughter is nearly 18. She'll be 18 in a couple of months' time. So to be honest with you, it's her that's found things the most difficult, even though she hasn't had to do her A-level exams, which I told her is always a positive, I can assure you. But the fact that she hasn't had to do her exams. But I think for the kids at that age, I mean, a lot of her friends recently have gone through their 18th birthdays in lockdown without their friends. Hers is August, so I don't know whether she'll be in Qatar, whether she'll be in Ireland, whether she'll be in Spain that we normally go to. So the two other ones have just been kind of, my daughter's in the bedroom over my shoulder here with her 6 or 7 friends on Zoom. She seems to be the one kind of controlling the Zoom call, so she loves it. I dropped my wife into school this morning because she's in filming assembly videos for the kids, and she's also very busy at the minute doing the end of year reporting and stuff like that. So it hasn't affected us massively. I mean, people are talking about obviously people have mental health has been affected. People have an ability to be able to get out and about and see friends and see family. It does take its toll, but I think generally with me starting a new business, with my wife, being a senior teacher in Doha British School, and the kids being a more independent age group, we haven't found it probably as difficult as certainly other families, friends that we know who have been kind of more pining to get out and about and kind of get the kids together, or et cetera, et cetera. So it hasn't been too bad. And as I say, the kids, my son is very much like myself, unless he's being tortured on a daily basis. He's going to be watching football videos or kicking a football around the house exactly the same as I would have been, whereas the two daughters are much more independent and are prepared to do a lot of work on their own without being kind of constantly reminded what they should be doing. So it's not been too bad, to be honest with you, for us. I mean, I can't complain. And for me, setting up a business as well, it's given me that time to be able to do what I needed to do, because setting up a business at the beginning, as you know, where there's a lot of stuff needs to be done, and it's given me the time to be able to do that in the comfort of my own home, at my own desk, you know what I mean? So it hasn't been bad, Simon, to be honest. I can't really complain.
No, that's good. And we'll come back to your new business, which I'm very keen to hear more about. But to give us a bit of a synopsis on Ronan Kelly, the professional. What's your qualification? Where did your journey take you from, both geographically as well as in your career path? Just give us a quick synopsis on that, and then we'll touch more on Rathmore.
I mean, I left my hometown of Derry when I was 18 to go to university in Liverpool. I ended up spending 10 years there. I did a international business with Spanish degree. After that degree was over, obviously 4 years, I spent the third year of that in Alicante in Spain, which is generally, if you study languages in university, generally the third year is like Erasmus, Socrates kind of grants in Spain, France, Germany, Italy, or whatever. So I was lucky enough to spend it in the beautiful city of Alicante, obviously on the Spanish coast. That was around the time where my wasn't wife at the time, was expecting our first daughter. So we then went back to Liverpool for the final year of university. Again, obviously doing languages in terms of in terms of working in the UK or Ireland, you're limited in terms of job wise, in terms of, you've got things like call centers. If you're extremely good, at completely fluent stage, you can do like translation and stuff like that in Europe. But the natural thing seemed to me then was teaching, which is why I applied for a PGCE. At the time, a teaching qualification that was also in the same university in Liverpool. So I completed that year, and I immediately got a modern foreign languages teaching job in a school called St Thomas More in Wigan, just right beside Wigan Athletics ground. I think it's the JD or JJB it was at the time. Yeah, JJB was it? I forget anyway at the time. It's the guy Whelan that owns Wigan Athletics. So my school was just directly across from that stadium. So I was there for 2 years. I then got another job because that school actually closed down. There was falling numbers in the borough, and unfortunately that was one of the schools that was chosen to close for amalgamations between other schools. So I then got a job in St Helens, all these nice rugby league towns between Liverpool and Manchester, with some young lads of 15 years of age. I mean, I'm around 6 foot tall, you're taller than me, but some of these guys were 2 or 3 inches bigger than you, and they were like 15, 16 years of age. It was crazy. There must be something in the water down around those parts. But yeah, no, I did another year in St Helens, again teaching Spanish and teaching French basic, kind of Key Stage 3, which is kind of first, second, and third year. So the French was more basic. It's very kind of beginner kind of level French compared to the more advanced Spanish that I taught. After that, around about that time, the UK government then changed it to be non-compulsory for children to do a language, the GCSE. And what that meant was that the number of jobs plummeted overnight because, as I'm sure you're well aware, not a lot of children in the UK and not a lot of parents see the value of studying a language right through up to the end of your school days. And children, for some reason, find it very difficult. For some reason, it was what I was good at in school rather than science or maths or anything else. It was what I enjoyed and what I was good at. But because of the fact that then kids only had to do it for Key Stage 3, which was your first, second, and third year of secondary school, after that, the vast majority of kids then chose your PE, your IT, your geography, your history, etc., etc. Now, what that meant is what you were only teaching kind of low-level Spanish and French, and it wasn't really something that I thought I fancy doing this for the next 30, 40 years. So I had a serious discussion with my wife, and I said, look, I believe that the career choice I've made is not what I can see myself doing long term. And I had quite a few friends that were in the Liverpool area, sort of Merseyside area, who were working in construction, mainly quantity surveyors. And I got to know a bit about what it involved and what the profession was, and I thought that that's something that I would be reasonably good at, and I thought I'd give it a go. Now, just at that time, John Moores, again, the same university, were just starting like a non-cognate master's degree, so it was a 2-year part-time degree, a master's for basically people who were looking to change careers. So me and there was another couple of Irish guys actually that I'm good friends with, Sean McMath, who you know well. Yeah. And another couple of lads as well, Manus Bradley, another good friend who lives in Dubai. They were both doing it at the same time. So it was a good idea to do it, especially when you've got other guys doing it at the same time. So the course was 2 years. At the time, I I got a job in Liverpool working. A friend of mine was working on a big housing estate in Liverpool. He got me a job with a brickwork firm just as a trainee QS. And they were very good. They taught me the basics, and I went from there to a company called Solomon's Europe, who were like a PQS firm. And I spent about a year there, and then I went to Carillion, who I'm sure you're well aware of, and probably everybody be aware of Carillion. So I ended up with Carillion for around probably about 4 years between Birchwood and Warrington, just outside, sort of closer to Manchester, obviously, yeah. Big, just off the M62 between Liverpool and Manchester. A couple of years there, but that was around about 2009 when obviously the big crash happened, and obviously jobs were tightened there. They then sent me down to Gloucestershire, a place called Stroud. I don't know if you know Stroud. Stroud is a small town down in Gloucestershire. So I ended up down there. It was a framework agreement with Network Rail. What it was basically an upgrade of a lot of kind of existing rail lines down in that part of the UK. Unfortunately, at that time, our third child, our daughter, was born. And what that was that my wife was at home with a full-time job and 3 young kids. And quite frankly, she let me know it wasn't going to last very long. So that was what kind of...
I can imagine Felice saying that. I know Felice fairly well, so yeah.
Especially when I was playing 5-a-side football during the week and be able to go out and socialise with the other guys who were in the same kind of boat, you know. But I mean, that was the kind of spur for us to leave England and make our way back to Ireland. So we then went back, Felice and the kids moved back to Belfast. We bought a house quite close to her parents' house. And then about 2 or 3 months after, when I was in Gloucester, Carillion actually owned a small civil engineering firm on the outskirts of Dublin. And they said, look, we need someone over there for at least a year. And I decided to take it, even though I knew it probably wasn't going to be something long term because I knew the business was struggling, but it was easier to be in the same island, at least in Dublin. I mean, it still meant I was away during the week, Monday to Friday, but it meant I only had a 1.5 hour drive home on a Friday afternoon and down the road on a Monday morning. So that's why I decided to take that up. And as I say, that lasted for about 1.5 years before unfortunately that company went bust. So I ended up back in Belfast. At the time, I was offered something with Carillion back in Sellafield. Carillion had picked up a big contract in Sellafield. And again, I was just about to accept that, but I was doing a bit of supply teaching at the time, obviously, to just get some money. And I was ended up doing back just a sub-teaching because that was the easiest thing, obviously. You know, when I'm working in Belfast, there was a lot of schools and they needed supply teachers. So I was doing that on a daily basis. And then a school actually offered me a 6-month maternity contract in a school called Dundonald. Now, I was going from a teacher to into construction, back to teaching again. So it clearly wasn't ideal, but at the time, you know, the economy was on its knees and it was a secure job for 6 months and the school was like 10 minutes from the house. So I ended up taking that job, and that was from June through to the summer. That was 6 months from June through to the summer term. I then spent the summer probably looking after the kids, I think, because the wife was working as well. Then I was actually doing a few days sub-teaching whenever the schools opened up again in September, and I was actually in the school in Dundonald just on a day subbing when I actually got the call from Qatar, from Peter Murphy. I'm sure you know Peter from Quantum. Where I got the call and said, Ronan, the job is here. Can you be in Qatar within 48 hours? Typical Peter.
48 hours?
So I said, I need you here within 48 hours. So I remember I was in the school and I went on the break and I phoned my wife and I said, because we knew it was coming, you know, we were expecting the call because I had spoke with Peter. I actually did 3 months work in Athens in Greece for Peter the previous year, just in a short-term contract. So that's why I knew Peter. Right. So I was basically waiting on the call to ring at any moment. And when it did ring, that's what Peter said. He said, Ronan, we need you to be here. We have a job on a sewage treatment works, which was the Doha North Sewage Treatment Works, which is where Sean and myself and Jamie McNeil and Johnny Devine and a whole squad of us were working on at one point. So that's the way it was. I basically left school that day and I thanked them very much for for giving me the work when they did. And I said that would be the last time I'll be teaching there. I went home, packed the bag, and I was on a plane the next day to Qatar. And the wife obviously stayed at home. Yeah. And she was working for Bernardo's, you know, the charity. So she was managing a big literacy scheme for Bernardo's in Belfast. And I got to the end of that first year. And again, she said to me, Ronan, I can't I can't cope with 3 young kids and a full-time job. You know, it's just too much on me. So I said to her, look, why don't you ask for a sabbatical for 12 months from your job? Why don't we rent out our house in Belfast? So therefore it becomes an adventure for you and the kids for a year. And if you don't like it, we'll all go back together. Your job will still be there. Our house will still be there. So she went, oh, okay, maybe there's nothing to lose. So of course, 12 months later, Bernardo's called her, are you coming back? And she says, no, I'm not. I'm quite happy in the States.
So when was this? When did she come out? What year was
She
that?
came out after about 9 months. I came in October 2012, would it have been? Yes. And she came in the following summer. So I did like 9 months on my own, and then she came through, and the kids were here for the start of the school term the following August. So that she's coming up now just to 7 years, and I'll be coming up to 8 years in October.
8 years, okay.
So, but a to and fro in terms of professions and in terms of locations, and I've been around, but you know, we haven't looked back. I think moving to Qatar is something that you know, we haven't regretted, and it's now opened up the opportunity for me to own my own business and to kind of drive our own destiny going forward. And you know, for that we'll always be grateful. You know, and particularly to the likes of Peter Murphy at Quantum, you know, for giving me the opportunity to come out here. And Peter was someone who he greatly looked after. He's someone who has a very strong family ethos in terms of how he works his business. So, you know, there are certain people who I think you always have to be grateful for in terms of how your career is shaped. And you know, Peter's certainly one of those.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Quantum, so you've spent sort of the last 7 years in Qatar with your family. You're working you were working with Peter on particular claims. I know that you've had some I wouldn't say challenges, but you've had some episodes in which you were looking to challenge yourself. I've known you mainly through the football side, and I know how much your career means. I know how much your football means. I certainly know how much your family means.
Yeah.
Was there a certain point in that sort of, so how long were you at Quantum?
Around about 4.5 years, I think, give or take.
And was there a point in which, you know, what was it that made you sort of go in not a different direction, but was it the status quo that just isn't, it's not really you, is it? You need to be able to find new challenges. So what made you sort of move to a different direction?
I mean, at Quantum, it was when I did the chartership for the RICS. So obviously at the time, myself and Sean McMath were doing it, and Adam Brady. So that was something that I was keen to do. Now that was great because we were working on a live project. I think if you're doing the likes of the RICS chartership, it's much better to be working on a construction project per se rather than working in claims, because claims is a very specialized element of construction. And with you doing the RICS chartership, you have to have a kind of broad, you know, construction knowledge in terms of projects, in terms of, you know, pre-tender, pre-contract, post-contract, you know, procurement strategies, tendering, etc., etc. If you're kind of doing that in a claims business, you're much more kind of limited on what your actually day-to-day exposure is in terms of construction. So at that time, I spent the first 2 years of my time at Quantum, as I say, on the Doha North Street Treatment Works, which was one of the biggest projects in Qatar at that time. I mean, it was a huge project. It was a Singaporean company called Keppel Sagers who were building that. And as I say, at Quantum, there was about 5, 6, 7 of us that were seconded on there doing QS work, contract management, subcontract management, payment, variations, the standard kind of work that a QS would do. So it was a perfect time for me to actually then go ahead and do my RICS chartership, which I was happily passed the first time round when I got that. I think it was about 2015 now. So at the time then, I mean, I would then had obviously discussions with Driver Tret. Now, obviously Quantum, whereas Quantum have offices kind of, small offices kind of in various countries around Europe and different places, you know, Driver was that kind of much bigger consultancy, kind of global consultancy. So when I was approached by them, it was obviously of interest because I was moving into, you know, shall we say, like a multinational kind of consultancy. So it was going to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more of a challenge. So I went in there as associate director, and I was quickly promoted to director of the kind of Quantum commercial team in Qatar. I mean, that was a very successful 3 years because we went from a loss-making business at Driver Tret, were actually very close to closing the office, to probably being the most profitable office across the region within 2.5 years, you know. So yeah, that lasted about 2.5 years. I left Driver in September. There was a few months of back and fro. I mean, I started working for a company, but unfortunately that company collapsed over Christmas, only after about 2 months after I joined them. I think the Lebanese banking crisis, two of the main investors were Lebanese, and I think the Lebanese banking crisis at the time had a huge impact on what happened, because everything collapsed almost overnight. So that left me in a bit of a tricky position work-wise, and I had a few good offers from various people, but that's when I kind of sat down and thought about it and said, look, I've been here now long enough. I've always been someone who likes to be in control of my own destiny. I've, the likes of the football team. I'm the manager of the football team here. I started football teams from scratch back in Liverpool when I was 17, 18 years of age, which is like starting a business, because you start a football team, you've got to get football kits, you've got to get players, you've got to raise money, you've got to find a football pitch, you've got to make small things, but it's like running a business. So it's very, very similar, even though it's on a much smaller scale. So I've always been someone who's kind of likes to be in control, sort of, do you know what I mean? Some people would see that as a negative, but I very much like to be someone who says, right, it's me, it'll drive things, because what I'll do is I'll make sure to do it thoroughly, because that's the way I like doing things. So when I talked to me, my wife was obviously, worried, because she's trying to be the sensible head. I've got the kind of head that's being, forget the risk, let's just go for it. But she's going, we've got 3 kids here in school and blah, 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 and we need to think about it. And I think whenever she kind of sat down with me and she could see the determination that I had to do it, and she just said, look, even if I say no, you're still going to do it anyway, aren't you?
Where have I heard that before, Ronan?
If you just say yes, if you just say yes, it's easier on everyone then.
But isn't that what the wife usually says? That's what my wife usually says. Listen, just say yes, and your life will be much more simple.
Exactly. So it was good to turn the screw.
You need to understand that.
Yeah. So no, to be fair, I mean, she's always supported me in terms of, leaving teaching, because teaching, I was in a job, you had a secure wage, you've got a pension, blah, blah, blah. But, she's always been someone, and she came back that day and seen that I was unhappy and just said, look, if you're unhappy, you change it. And when I said I wanted to move to Qatar, she says, okay, go to Qatar. Whenever I said I think you should come, she came here and give it a go, And I think she'll be the first to tell you now that it was the right thing for our family. It's difficult being away from family and friends. I mean, everybody who's an expat will that the first thing they'll tell you is the thing that we hate the most is being away from family and friends. But when you have a very supportive network of family and friends like we do, I'm sure you're no different, where both of our parents are saying to us, we absolutely miss the kids more than we miss you. But I think anybody's parents will say the same. They miss the grandkids more than they miss us. But even because they have to make a sacrifice as well. Grandparents have to make a huge sacrifice, because they pine to see those grandkids, and it's a huge sacrifice for them. But they can come on their yearly trips. I mean, Felice's mum and dad always come for a month at the end of January when the kids have that half term at the first week in February. My mum and dad usually come at least once a year, obviously with my brother Jared, who being in Dubai. So my mum is the only thing is my mum is not a good flyer at all. I mean, she absolutely hates it, and it's very difficult to get her on a plane. But we do persuade her. And Jerry just had a baby there. Obviously, I don't know if you heard, he just had his first child there.
Oh, that's fantastic news.
About 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's unfortunate at the minute, because my mum and dad were actually due to fly out in May. And obviously at the minute they're restricted, and Laura, his wife's mother, was obviously supposed to fly over as well, and then now we can't get over from here, and they don't know if we're going to get home for the summer.
So where is he now? Is he still in Dubai?
He's in Dubai.
Or Oman?
He's in Dubai. He's in Dubai, and like Sean McMath, as well, had a little baby there a few months ago as well. So it's difficult, when you're talking about people that are, that's really difficult. People's like 18th birthday parties, 30th birthdays, 40th birthdays, people have had kids. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are much bigger problems out there at the moment. People suffering badly, but
it's the normalcy.
At the minute, there are people probably feeling, why is this happening to me at this time? We want to show off our new baby. We want to do this. We want to do that. So, but as I say, I think most people will realize that we're extremely lucky. And when you see the kind of issues that some people are facing in Qatar, across the Middle East, across the world, I think we have to realize that I think our problems are pale and insignificant. The kind of the issues that was going on, but it was good to see kind of when this all happened, that there was a kind of drive even amongst our friends. They'd help out where we could, to try and throw a bit of money in and try and help people who were in need of, basic stuff, food and shelter and, a bit of money to be able to feed them. So I think we've always got to realise that we are extremely lucky to, to be where we are. And, we're firm believers on helping people out when you can. I mean, that's something that was instilled into us as children by our parents, is that you help out people in need. It's as simple as that, and that's always something that we've always tried to do here. But as I say, we're very lucky that we're in a position to do so, and we always try and make sure that we do.
As you know, the show is, to give you a little bit of background, I wanted to start this particular show, which was very off the cuff initially, but it was because of a lot of the negativity that Qatar gets. Wanted to give an insight into my network and the people that have been very supportive of me, of which you are, of course, included in that. And talking about business in general, particularly entrepreneurial business, because it's actually not as difficult now to set up a business as it once was about 10 years ago. We know a number of the same people, or I know these people probably through yourself and through the football. So Sean McMath, Mickey Kelly, your brother, Jamie McNeil, a lot of these people have been tempted and have gone on to other countries. They've gone to the dark side, shall we say. Have you ever been tempted? Have you ever been tempted? Have you ever been offered anything anywhere else? Because you've stuck by your guns and you've stayed. You stayed in Qatar. I assume because of the family first and foremost. They're settled.
Yeah, I mean, I have been tempted. I mean, we were very close. We talked about it. I mean, in the last few years, my wife and I were seriously discussing a move to Madrid in Spain, or potentially Dubai. Okay, I mean, Madrid, because Spanish contractors in general are very active worldwide. I mean, I've had a number of Zoom calls with the big Spanish contractors actually this week, and we have stuff arranged for next week, kind of the top 10 kind of European contractors that operate anywhere in the world. So, I mean, as I say, with the Spanish background of the language that I have, I also now have Eva Martinez working with me, who was the old secretary of the Spanish Business Council in Qatar. So she is obviously very well connected with the Spanish contractors. She's obviously very well connected with the Spanish contractors in Madrid. Now, of course, I mean, everybody's had our weekends in Dubai, and you get there and you think, wow, this place looks amazing and blah, blah, blah. But, I've spoken with so many people, particularly people with young families, who have made the move to Dubai, and they said, if we had the opportunity to go back to Qatar tomorrow, we would be on the first flight that we would get on there. Because they just said, I mean, if you're like Jerry, who obviously just had his first baby there recently, if you're young, free, and he wasn't single for quite a while, but, if you've got that ability to be able to go and party at the weekends and blah, 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 I mean, that's what some people want to do, and that's fantastic. But for me, my kids were settled here. They're in a very good school. My wife's working in a very good school. We have a good, very close network of friends here, fellow Irish, Scottish like yourself, English, British in general. So, but there's the core kind of element, the guys that have been here a long time. There's the Alex Jamanjuk, there's Paul Gregg, there's ourselves, you know what I mean? There's Niall Keogh, people who have been here, and that's people who you can just call up on a daily basis and you can rely on them for anything. And I spoke to a few people who went over to Dubai, and you just said, it's so big, it takes you so long to get from A to B. The people have said to me, there is not the same community spirit in Dubai as there is in Doha. I mean, a number of people have said that to me. They says Doha has such a tightly knit expat community, and Dubai just doesn't have that and will never have it. So whenever you've got that, you're looking at the kind of superficial things, and well, first of all, if your kids are settled, it would be very selfish for me to move them on a personal account. But if it dictated that a job, and maybe we're going to lose your job here and there was a job offer in Dubai, that's different. But we were going to do it at the time more for preference, and obviously with my brother being there, it was to be closer to family. It was meant that it was going to be easier for my mum to come and visit, particularly because since the embargo, you can't fly to Dubai and then jump on a plane to Qatar and be there in 2 hours time. So it's now flying to Qatar from Dubai is like flying from Ireland to Dubai, you know what I mean? So I mean, that's been a real pain for us, and we are still hoping to this day that when this all flies by, that hopefully the embargo will hopefully fall follow soon after, because I mean, but even in business, Simon, it makes it much easier. It makes the Middle East region much smaller for us and much more accessible if this embargo can be resolved. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen in the news even this week that you know, the Egyptians protesting outside the Egyptian embassy, where Egypt is basically refusing a plane from Qatar Airways to take Egyptian nationals who have lost their jobs back into Egypt. Now, I'm assuming that has to do with the ongoing political situation due to the embargo. And you're thinking, you know, if we're still that far apart 3 years later, then, you know, when's it going to be resolved? That's a big issue, you know.
3 years on...
3 years almost exactly,
Friday,
isn't it? Yeah.
Friday, 5th of June.
Almost exactly. So
it's just disappeared. But it's interesting what you say, because there are positives and negatives. I wouldn't say positives and negatives. There's arguments for both sides.
Yeah.
You say something along the lines of, if the embargo is relaxed or is opened, that it makes the GCC region much closer. However, what I've found in Qatar is that since the embargo, it's actually opened up a hell of a lot of opportunities for construction, for design and build, consultancy such as yourself, because you don't have people coming in and cherry picking the clients from the UAE. So people have to open an office, or they have to be based in Qatar. It's obviously now and impossible from a business perspective to fly from the UAE to Qatar and make it justifiable and making it economically efficient. So I find that it's been actually quite positive. Once we got rid of the sort of, or we got beyond the 6 months of uncertainty and making sure there was chicken on the shelves and making sure that Qatar was becoming self-sufficient. It's fast-tracked a lot of that from the government perspective. I think they've handled it quite well. Irrespective of anything political, which I'm not interested in, it's nothing to do with us. We're guests in this country. We've got to take advantage of the situation. We've got to work within our means, shall we say. And I've found that quite positive. And I think as a repercussion of that, the business setup element, certainly with Qatar Financial Centre, which I believe you're partnered with, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
That relaxation, that sort of evolution of QFC, the evolution of being able to set up a business has been instigated by the embargo happening. So to an extent, you are actually in a better position because your business has been set up in a much more efficient manner because of what happened in the embargo, and you don't have other people coming in potentially taking that expat entrepreneurial business from you. The final point would be that I think Qatar, in the nicest possible way, because we love living here, is, when I say behind the times, I just mean that there are less people that have done the obvious businesses in Qatar than there is in Dubai. So therefore the opportunities are even further. They're even more. They're still here. They're in their infancy. They're still amateur. I used an example a few weeks ago, which I just spotted this morning from Nigel Pereira, put a post up on one of my groups, that there's now a courier service, a commercial courier service, not a limo driver, not an Uber driver, an actual courier service has been launched in Qatar for the first time. Yes, you've got Q-Post, but these are basics. These are basic industries that we would expect back in the UK and Ireland and mainland Europe.
40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So there are always opportunities that have been created. How have you found the business formation process? How long did that take, and what's the good points and what's the bad points of setting up for yourself in Qatar?
I'll be honest, I was pleasantly surprised at how kind of efficient and streamlined it was. I mean, we obviously are good friends with Chris Rodia, whose consultancy Serin was set up about 2 years ago. Now, the process had changed slightly because I sat down with Chris and went through it. So the forms, whenever I compared my forms with his forms, there was slight changes, etc., etc. But basically, all I did was basically email the QFC and just say, look, here's my business idea. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. As soon as they were aware or decided that it met their requirements in terms of the types of businesses they allowed to do it, all they did was basically send me like a link to an online portal. There were like 7 or 8 different kind of elements of that portal, and what you could do was just download the forms, fill them in manually, basically scan them and sign them and upload them to the system again. That process probably took around, it's like financial projections, basic stuff, business plan, what you would expect to do anyway. which most of that I had prepared. So I mean, I would say probably there's about a 3 or 4 week preparation period that you need to go through to make sure you have those documents in place. But as and when you get access to that portal, you can almost upload those immediately. There isn't a case of you have to get this part approved and then you move on to that, and then you can move on to that, and you move on to that. You can basically, if your documents are prepared, you can upload them all at the one time. And it was about a 2 week, maybe maximum process where they reviewed the documents. They came back with a couple of queries, which I answered straight away. And then I checked the portal, and there it was, Rathmore Consulting, 00901. So they says, you got the best number, 901. I thought, perfect. So they said we were actually waiting. They said, I spoke to the guys who were waiting to see who got that number, 901, because it was an easy one to remember. So there it was, and I was delighted, and I called my business partner, Peter Murphy, who's a different Peter Murphy, by the way. Yeah. So I called Peter, and I said, we've done it, we're registered already, and he couldn't believe it. He says, really, already? So Peter's actually in Ireland at the moment, and he's actually supposed to be starting work for us today on a claim. He better be working on it anyway as we speak. It was a bank holiday in Ireland yesterday, so I said to him, that's your last day off. You're now a full-time employee of Rathmore Consulting. So yeah, no, Peter was delighted, and obviously Eva came on board working with us. There's another ex-Quantum employee, Matt Lister, as well, who doesn't officially own any business at the moment, but we're looking at other options. I mean, you know, the way I see it is that I'm keen to expand. I don't see us being a huge consultancy. My kind of idea is they have a very efficient, professional team that we can rely on. Now, the beautiful thing that we have at the moment is that we are actually partnering with a firm in Dubai who do one element of claims, and we deal with the kind of commercial element of the claims. Now, the great aspect of that is that, number one, they're probably the best delay analyst firm that I've ever seen, because the guy who owns the company has developed his own kind of bespoke software, delay analysis software. For example, we met with a big oil and gas contractor yesterday. I went to their offices, and then we did an online Zoom call with the guys in Dubai. And what he was able to tell them from their construction programs, their jaws hit the floor, because he has developed something which is basically unrivaled in the market. And it's his own software, it's bespoke, it's project specific. And as I say, those guys, we came out of that meeting yesterday, and they said, we want it, because what you've done is you've showed that we have a lot of issues internally about how we're managing our programs and our documents. This system can actually manage all that process on your behalf. And now some contractors will say, look, we're not a claims-oriented company. We value our relationships much more, and unless things are really bad, we don't submit the claim. That's fine. You know, we get that. But it doesn't mean you can't be efficient in terms of how you manage your project.
Document it.
In terms of how you
audit it and document it.
It's very simple. It's about putting good work practices. It's about making efficiency in your team. You know, we would say that by using this software, we can actually streamline your project management team. You still need a planner. You still need a contracts manager or a contracts administrator, but you don't need a team, because we can actually manage a lot of that. We actually will basically put one guy to be incorporated into your team, and that one guy will basically manage your entire project management system, and he will actually guide your project manager, your project director, your construction managers, your procurement team. I mean, this is, you know, has the potential to change how construction projects are managed, and that's what those big global companies have said to me. You know, the big European contractors. I mean, if you look on the top 10 European contractors in the world, we are actually spoken to 4 of those top 10 already, and 4 of those top 10 have actually said things like, look, we haven't seen anything on this level before, and we want to potentially implement it. The great thing is about this system is that we can actually manage it remotely from Dubai or from Qatar, and we could be managing a rail project in Norway, a road project in the UK, an oil refinery in Chile or Venezuela or whatever it may be. That's the beautiful point of this system, and it is just probably the most impressive thing that I've seen in construction. And this is why at the moment what I'm trying to kind of tell potential clients on LinkedIn is that you give us 1 hour of your time and we'll show you a demonstration online of this software, and I can guarantee that when people see this, they will go, wow, it's incredible, you know. And this has been through this guy's hard work over the last 10 years. He's a forensic delay analyst, but his brother was a software program developer, And between the two of them, they have actually developed this piece of kit, which is, it's just phenomenal stuff, you know. And it gives us a big edge over, it gives us a huge edge over other consultancies, because we work exclusively with this in Qatar. So we are the only consultancy. So the big consultancies, some of the ones that I used to work for, the other ones that we consider to be competitors, none of them have this capability. And that gives us a distinct edge over our competitors already. And as a new company just starting out, that is huge for me and huge for Rathmore.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're finding problems, I mean, companies will know that they have problems and issues, but they don't know how to solve them.
Correct.
And you come in and you can solve them. That's pretty much what you're looking to do. But if you can actually highlight problems that they don't know about, and they are not therefore quantifying or putting together in relevant losses from a commercial perspective, then well,
those guys were
those issues.
Well, they were flabbergasted yesterday, because this can get into details. I mean, you know, Primavera, you know, a P6 program, these can get very, very complex and complicated, particularly if you're working on an oil and gas project. You could have 20, 30 interim milestones that each have liquidated damages or delayed damages applied. It's huge risk for a contractor. This software is able to get into such a detail on these programs that when we showed them yesterday, after about 6 months of their project, what we told them, they just went, we were totally unaware of this. We didn't know that you've identified all these issues in our programs, blah, blah, blah. And we said, look, here they are, and we can rectify these, and we can manage your project so that we are almost entirely eliminating. It's all about
preventative
correct.
measures.
And you don't have to submit claims. But what we can do is we can prevent or greatly reduce the potential of employers or main contractors on subcontractors of actually being able to apply damages. And, you know, especially with the oil and gas projects, you can have, I mean, I've seen delay damages of hundreds of thousands of reals per day here. You know, you have 1 month delay and your whole profit margin is gone on potentially a 3 or 4 year project. You know, and why are you here? Why have you grafted for 4 years to lose your entitlement because of something that may not have been your fault, but you didn't document the time, and therefore you can't substantiate your entitlement in extension of time or prolongation cost? This system can actually manage that entire process.
So here's a sort of rhetorical question for you. Is main contracting that complex, or is it people's laziness to document and audit that causes the issues for the contractors?
We had this very conversation yesterday, and this is actually, we had a very interesting discussion with the general manager of said contractor yesterday, and he said, how do we get our staff? He says, I believe that it's our staff that are just walking around and maybe not doing it. And he says, I 100% believe it. How do we incentivize our staff? How do we actually manage them? If a guy lays 100 blocks on one day and he only does 50 blocks on the next day, he said to me, how do we effectively actually, number one, how do we track that? And number two, how do we find out the reasons for that? And then how do we actually incentivize those guys to lay 100 blocks every single day, and some days potentially do 110 blocks? Because this is the thing, he says, this is another Irish guy, by the way. I don't think I'm giving too much away, because there's plenty of Irishmen in big construction companies here. I mean, he said where I grew up and where I came from in terms of my career, it was nearly like a competition, you against the other gang, to see who could do the best amount of work and see who could actually, you know, produce the amount, the best amount or the most. Whereas here, I mean, my response to him was that we're dealing in a very, very different culture. We're dealing in such a multicultural society. You've got such a high turnover of staff here. You haven't got the same level of education. You haven't got the same quality of workforce. I mean, you know, that's just ethic. You know, that's just part and parcel. You know, a lot of the workforce is coming in from underdeveloped countries where, you know, people aren't as lucky to have the same education as you or I had. You know, I mean, that's just unfortunately one of the very negative sides of humanity, of the world in general, is that a lot of the guys that are brought in here by their thousands are brought in and they're not well educated, and, you know, maybe it's difficult for them to actually understand what my job role is. I don't have the guidance, I don't have the support, I don't have the education, I maybe don't have the skill set to be able to do the job that I'm being asked to do. So there are all sorts of kind of issues here that are just, will they ever go away? Can they ever go away due to where we're working and due to the nature? I'm not sure.
It's at least I've got a wry smile on my face. Again, I'm not going to give anything away. So we tend to work with multinationals, with blue chips.
Yeah.
Because we know that they've got processes. We know that there's contracts in place, and a lot of the work is remote. The stakeholders are based in Europe, or they might be in Dubai.
Yeah.
And the conversations that we've had over the past sort of, let's say months, with a very good client, it's a great project, but it's taken months to get a contract in place. And it'll take less time to finish the project than it will to actually sign the contract, which I'm signing today. And you've got certain project managers in place, you've got certain clients, and they've got processes, procedures, protocols, etc., because of their stature, because of their size. But it's costing them money. Yeah. The lack of efficiency is costing them money, and it is completely quantifiable. So let's flip that into main contractors. And you flip that into the fact that there seems to be an attitude in the Middle East in particular, because of what you've just said. Let's throw thousands of non-skilled, non-qualified men, and the more we throw at it, the quicker it will get cut. And I've had this conversation for years, which is rubbish, in our opinion, right? But if you were to spend more time, so let's just throw something out there. Let's say it's a 2-year project. You might spend, and everything's in the planning, everything's in the detail. Of course it is. If you start to go straight off the bat and you don't know what you're planning, you don't know your parameters, you haven't got your client brief, you haven't got a design brief, you haven't got a design approvals, then you're building anything you want. If you spend time planning, if you spend time educating the correct or finding the right people, you would end up doing less in the front end, but more in the back end, and you can quantify that. Correct. They're so scared to do. I think they're so scared to do it, or they don't understand it. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what, we talked about that exactly yesterday. The guy in question says, "Can you quantify my inefficiency?" He says, because if we can actually quantify that, then we can actually monitor staff, and we can actually sort of root out the guys who are not performing to the same ability as the other guys. And he says that's the way it worked whenever I grew up. That's what it was. He says you were compared with your peers and the other gangs on a site or whatever it may be, the other foreman, and that's what it's done. He says, because that's how you get the most. He said, if you're actually working here and there's no kind of monitoring, and as you say, if the solution is bring more men, bring more equipment, of course that's not the solution. For me, the big issue that I have in Qatar, is that especially where we're dealing with some of the biggest and most complex construction projects in the world. You have like a 6-week design period for these projects, and what it goes from is design and build contracts turn into build and design. Is that you build, design, pull it down, you design, you fix it, and this is
so much rework.
This is the very reason why these 3-year projects are taking 6 years, 7 years. The Keppel Sagers project that I mentioned, the sewage treatment works, I think it's been going for something like 7 or 8 years over the original contract duration. That is absolute lunacy. Your cost at that stage will probably be 7, 8, 9, 10 times your budget. And then it's either that the Qataris have to pay the additional money, or you're going to end up in a huge fight with that contractor in court.
And it's most likely the latter.
And that is because of bad planning. If you spend 6 months or 12 months actually doing that plan to an nth degree and making sure, this is where BIM has come in, and people say, no, we shouldn't have all these variations, you shouldn't have all these changes, blah, blah, blah. Yet it's getting worse, if anything, And for me, it boils down to, if you actually spend the time doing a proper design, spending 5 or 6 times how much they're spending on the actual design element of a construction project, you will save huge amounts of money further down the line, and a huge amount of disputes. My work is in disputes, obviously the prime basis of my work, but generally speaking, we don't want to see people going to court for 2, 3, 4 years at a time, spending huge amounts of money fighting each other, and then probably both parties, there's no winner at the end of it, because there's been that much money spent and that much time spent, is that no one ends up a winner out of that. But for me, that is the one thing that I would like to change and try to actually educate people, is that if you don't spend the time designing, checking ground conditions, looking at everything, looking at the element of the building, do you need steel in the structure? One of the claims that we did, that was a huge design change on the building. The original design didn't have steel in the structure, and then they started building the structure, and then they realized, actually, do you know what, this won't withstand because of the grounding condition. You know, these are very basic things, but this has led to huge fights on these projects, because what you're doing is that you're minimizing your spend on the design element because you don't think it's actually worth it, when in actual fact it is the complete opposite.
It's the most important part of
the most important part by far. And if they do that, you will get your 3-year project maybe within 4 years. You will get your project close to budget. You won't end up in a huge fight.
Yeah, there's other elements that this part of the world seem to forget. I think there's and I'd hope you would agree with me. I believe there's a huge lack of education from the client side.
Yeah.
But we as contractors or professionals and consultants should take the responsibility for that. So therefore we educate them through the process, set the expectations. But there's also things like unrealistic timelines and unrealistic budgets.
Correct.
And again, it's about the mentality of, I don't want to spend money on a consultant for someone to tell me that it's going to take twice as long and twice as much money, because, and I'm not saying this happens all the time, I want to put a contract in place for half the money and half the time, because I know I'm not even going to spend that.
Exactly.
Because they will end up funding it. The payment terms are so unrealistic, the margins are so tight, and they won't be able to afford to take me to court or make the claims.
That's it.
And therefore the main contractors, like say Carillions, end up in a position which it's a no-win situation.
Yeah.
Why do you think main contractors, who again they're not silly contractors, you know, the guy you were talking to, are they so desperate for the work and for the cash flow for the next 3 years that they'll take that risk to lose it at the end?
That's it basically. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It is. That's what it comes down to, because you're fighting with so many people, and basically what it happens is if you go through a tender process and you're given, some of these might be given a price and say, no, we need a discount, blah, blah, blah. And they're basically told there and then, if you don't sign that, there are 10 guys outside the door who will sign it. And if you don't give it at that price and at that duration, there are 6 guys outside who have told me that they will give it me at that price and that duration. Now, 100%, that contract price is not enough, and that contract period is nowhere near sufficient. And as I say, it's very easy just to blame one side, but at the end of the day, until contractors realize that if we keep signing into this, it's the perfect storm for disputes and for projects to go very, very badly wrong. Because when we're representing contractors, we regularly get the comment from the other side, did anyone put a gun to your head to sign this contract? And the answer, of course, is no. But you're right, the very reason that they sign the contracts is because as a company, maybe work is drying up, they have maybe a couple of hundred employees, and companies, to be fair to them, don't want to make redundancies, and they see this, that look, even if we don't make any money for these next 2 or 3 years, it's just maintaining cash flow, it's maintaining our business, it's maintaining people's jobs. So there's a human element to taking on that work as well. But at the same time, I'm seeing contractors and I'm seeing their audited accounts for 3 years, and it's negative in terms of much money you're making. And I'm like, why are you here? What are you doing here?
It's only getting worse. It's only getting worse.
And this virus, I think, has the potential to make that even worse, because it's going to tighten everybody's belts even further.
Yeah. And with regards to sort of main contracting, and we're deemed as a main contractor, I've got a frustration with the supply chain and the understanding of the supply chain. I understand the supply chain. I understand that from the supplier level, it is 100% advance payments. I understand from the subcontractor level that they've got to make those payments to the suppliers. I understand they've got to pay their staff. I understand they've got the labor in-house. We are deemed as a main contractor, but we're not. We're a management contractor. We are a project manager of design and build. That's fundamentally what we do. We have design and project management and document control in-house, and then we take the full risk and responsibility down that supply chain.
Okay.
The amount of phone calls that we have trying to educate our subcontractors who say, you need to pay us this, you need to pay us this, you need to pay us this. Okay, but you've signed a back-to-back agreement that if you don't perform that, therefore you are liable, therefore the risk is shared between us and them. And again, there's a severe lack of education from a contract perspective with the subcontract market. And I feel for main contractors on a much, much higher level, in which they're taking contracts for the sake of it, they are then putting their supply chain at risk, but then the supply chain are not understanding their back-to-back agreements. So not only have the main contractors got people like you on board reactively looking at claims because their audit and paperwork isn't good enough, they're then having other disputes with their subcontractors, which again they haven't audited correctly. So it's a two-way battle. And they are stuck smack bang in the middle of it.
And what this is doing is taking away from the focus of what's important, which is actually building the project and getting things done on time. If you're fighting up the line with the employer and you're fighting down the line with 7 or 8 subcontractors, you know, the important parts of a construction project are being missed out here, and that's why these projects are in disarray. But I mean, you're talking about contracts, Simon. The number of people who we go on and we say to them, okay, guys, first and foremost, can we see a copy of your contract? And people are scurrying around the site office and they're going, oh, well, I don't think we have a copy of the contract here. It's maybe kept at head office. And you're going, well, how do you know what your obligations are on a day-to-day basis? If you suffer a delay event, how soon do you have to notify the employer? Do you have ongoing kind of obligations to notify of ongoing events, et cetera, et cetera? You know, it is just absolutely criminal, the lack of contract awareness that we see here. You know, the contract is basically just thrown to the side and these people just kind of ploy on with things, and you're like, well, guys, at the end of the day, that's what you're going to be governed by. If you have a huge arbitration in 4 or 5 years time, did you actually do what that contract said you were obliged to do? If you didn't, then you can forget about it, and what you will do is you will lose huge amounts of money. And we've seen Carillion. I mean, when I worked for Carillion, when we had to actually do our monthly, they were called IV meetings, it was like a CVR. You had to be able to substantiate to a penny what your spend was in that particular month. So I was baffled as to how a country who was that stringent in their practices got themselves into such a mess here. But I think at the time is when the crash happened, they were forced to try and look other markets. Now, Qatar was not their only major issue. I believe Canada, they also had major problems on the projects there. But if you're going to be a contractor who's never worked in a foreign market before, you don't take on a job like Mushrib. You come, you test the market, you understand, you speak to people, you understand what it is like to work in Qatar, because working in Qatar is very different to Carillion's working practices in the UK. And they got found out, and one very bad project, and potentially one in Canada, sunk a huge company, I think number 2 in UK in terms of kind of contracting organizations. Loads and loads of people, thousands of people losing their jobs, affecting their livelihoods, and this is all because of carelessness by the senior managers of that company. I mean, at the end of the day, these are the guys you have to hold their hands up and say it was bad business decisions by us that led us into that market without doing our due diligence in terms of sending someone for 6 to 12 months, taking a 10, 20, 30 million real contract and then go, whoa, okay, now we know what's involved, or that's not for us as a company and we look elsewhere. They didn't do that. And Mushrib, as I'm sure you know, is a very, very difficult project. All the main contractors are having a tough time on there. But the only thing for the other contractors are on there is that they had previous Middle East experience. You know, the likes of CCC came in and took over and finished Carillion's element of the works, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, if you're going to go and work on a foreign land, you've got to be aware of what you're getting involved in, because, you know, the contracts here are heavily amended, you know, in favor of one party over the other. I know there's an appetite or an apparent appetite to change that. But if you're going to go somewhere and you have a contract that you're used to working with, even in the UK, the FIDIC contract is not as widely used as the likes of the NEC. So if you're coming and you're using a very different form of contract and that is heavily amended, you've got to get used to how that is actually operated and how you actually protect yourself as a business under those contract terms.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it seems to be that certainly with the main contractors, certainly maybe with Carillion, there was a fear of saying no, or there was a fear of drawing the line or making the claims or saying this isn't, you know, this isn't scheduled works, or there is a delay because of the fact that they wanted to gain payments, they wanted to gain cash flow. Why is that for a company that's so experienced? What's your opinion on why?
I mean, I know we know. I mean, we know. I think you know personally, and I know personally a number of guys who was on there, and they said, look, to start off with, we made the classic mistake. We signed a contract that was massively probably undervalued, and we agreed a program, exactly what we talked about a minute ago. But they didn't realize that you need the cash flow. I mean, here a lot of times the contractors have to fund the projects, and they might get their money at the end, but it's not like the NEC contract in the UK where you can actually submit your variation, and if you don't get it agreed within 28 days or whatever, then you have other kind of recourse to actually deal with that at the time. Here, Carillion weren't aware that, when you have a variation, you might not get paid that variation for 4 years, and this was just very probably alien to them. And they probably weren't able to deal with such a huge change to how they actually operated in the UK or in other markets. And ultimately, because they had underpriced the job, then they ended up that they were in big trouble as a result of that, But it's sad to see. I mean, a company that I spent 4 or 5 years with, and we're a very good company to work for, very diligent, very good practices in place, and to see and hear how bad it was here, you're thinking, how is this the same company that I worked for only a few years ago,
Mm. It was, we'll end it. I'm conscious of time because you've got a very important appointment in 45 minutes. But just to finish off, really enjoyed this, and I want to sort of grab you just for a few minutes when we finish the podcast, because I want to carry on longer term talking about this. And it's very important, no matter whether it's a 200 million real contract or a 2 million real contract. The contracts are important and relative to the size of the organizations. So we'll carry on that conversation. But one funny story that I heard, which I'm not sure if you're aware of, the National Museum, which was built by Hyundai. Have you heard of the greatest barter deal in the world? And if anyone that's listening to this is aware or unaware of the facts, because this is rumor and I'm not sure if it's true, but the greatest barter deal in the world with Hyundai was that the cost, this is what's been said, the cost of the National Museum was twice the contract value that Hyundai actually signed for. In exchange for a reduced rate of gas supply from Qatar to Korea. I think that's one of the greatest.
I haven't heard anything, but it would not surprise me. But I spent quite a bit of time.
Korean government, the South Korean government paid for Hyundai's overheads in exchange for that. A subsidized.
Would not surprise me. I mean, I'm well aware that contract value that was signed was massively more in terms of what the final was. So I would say, whenever he said double, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was actually more than double. Maybe that's
probably
thereabouts. But that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, that's with Qatar, there is a lot of leverage due to the fact that a lot of the gas comes from here with the likes of huge countries.
Listen, I regard that as smart negotiation. You bring an intermediary such as the government. That's smart commercial business. We want this iconic building, the Desert Cactus National Museum. We know it's going to cost a fortune because over engineering or whatever the case may be. Instead of paying you cash, we'll pay you something that you can actually leverage on your side.
Makes sense.
It makes sense.
I mean, if that's something that worked for both parties and they can walk away and shake hands, then by all accounts, that's what deals get made in many mysterious ways, Simon, as we know.
Absolutely. They should have offered free flights for the airport. That might have gone faster as well.
I would have done.
Ronan, I really appreciate your time. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks very much. I'm
sure we'll do it again and stay on the line and we'll have a quick chat. This will be going out tomorrow. We'll get this posted. This is Qatar episode 8 with Ronan Kelly of Rathmore Consulting. Ronan, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Cheers.